Welcome to the Hindu Daily.
It's great to be here. We have an incredibly dense set of articles today.
We really do. You know, when I look through the paper, I usually expect things to make a certain kind of sense. Good economy, strong currency. But today, it feels like the rulebook has just been thrown out.
It really does. It's a day of paradoxes.
We're going to walk you through 9 key articles that show exactly that. We're covering everything from the rupee defying economic gravity to the secret life of delivery trucks, and even a crisis at Starbucks that has nothing to do with coffee.
Yeah, we'll move through this systematically. We'll start with the editorial and opinion pages, then jump into a really mind-bending science piece, and wrap it all up in the business section.
Our goal here is to connect the dots for you. So let's dive right in with the lead editorial. It's about the rupee, and frankly, on the surface, it makes no sense at all.
It really is an economic mystery, the devaluation of the rupee.
Right, and this is where I get stuck. I'm looking at the numbers for India. Growth is estimated at, 7.4%? That's world leading.
Absolutely. And inflation is incredibly low, 1.33% at the end of 2025. I mean, that's rock bottom.
So high growth, low inflation. And you look at the current account deficit, and it's modest, just 0.76% of GDP. By any textbook definition, the economy is a powerhouse.
These are the kinds of numbers that finance ministers, they dream about.
Exactly. So in a rational world, your currency should be getting stronger. People should be buying rupees. But that is not what's happening.
No, it's the complete opposite. The rupee has fallen about 6% since April 2025.
6% is a huge slide for a major economy. It feels like a glitch in the system. If the fundamentals are this good, why is the currency tanking? Who or what is the villain here?
Well, the thing is, the villain isn't inside the house. The editorial is very clear on this. It's not an Indian economic problem. It's not about our trade deficits.
Which are manageable.
Right. This is all about capital outflow. Money is leaving the country, and it's being driven by geopolitics, specifically the hostile stance from the White House.
We're talking about U.S. President Donald Trump.
We are. The administration has made some moves that have essentially weaponized trade policy against India.
I saw the headline about a 50% import duty. That just sounds aggressive.
Aggressive is putting it mildly. It's a whole cascading set of tariffs. Think about it from an investor's point of view. First, the U.S. announces a 25% reciprocal tariff on Indian goods.
Okay, that's already a big hit.
It is. But then, because India continued to buy Russian oil, which, keeps our energy costs down, Washington slapped another 25% on top of that.
So you're looking at a 50% wall for any Indian company trying to export to the U.S.
Correct. And it doesn't even stop there. There's a looming threat of even more tariffs on countries that do business with Iran.
Wait, hold on. How much business do we actually do with Iran? Is it significant?
That's the real irony here. It's tiny. It's something like 0.15% of our total trade. It's basically a rounding error.
So it's not about the money?
Not at all. In this climate, the size of the trade doesn't matter. It's the principle of the sanctions. It feels less like economics and more like using the financial system as a blunt instrument.
So if you're a global investor, you're looking at India and saying, the economy's great, but I do not want to get caught in the crossfire of U.S. foreign policy.
That's it exactly. You're reacting to fear, not to the fundamentals, and you can see it in the capital flows. Last year, we had a net inflow of over $10.6 billion. Money was pouring in.
And this year?
This year, we're looking at a net outflow of $3.9 billion. That is a massive, massive swing.
So, of course, people look to the Reserve Bank of India, the RBI, to fix this. But the article suggests their hands are sort of tied here.
They are, and this is a really crucial distinction to make. The RBI's job is to manage volatility. They can smooth out the fall, prevent a sudden crash that breaks the system.
Right.
But they can't artificially prop up the currency against a geopolitical tidal wave.
It's like trying to stop a hurricane with an umbrella.
That's a perfect analogy. Compare this to 2022. Back then, the rupee was falling because the U.S. Fed was hiking interest rates. That was an economic problem.
With an economic solution.
Exactly. This is a diplomatic standoff. The RBI can't raise interest rates to fix a tariff war that was started by the U.S. president. The solution has to come from diplomats, not central bankers.
And the kicker, the article says, is that usually a falling currency helps your exports, but not this time.
Not at all. Because a 6% drop in the rupee does absolutely nothing to offset a 50% tax at the U.S. border. So we get all the pain of a weak currency, like expensive oil imports, which could bring back inflation, without any of the usual gain.
That is a really tough spot to be in. It shows how vulnerable even a strong economy can be.
It really does. Economics does not happen in a vacuum.
Okay, that's the grim macro picture. Let's zoom in a bit. Literally down to the street level. The second editorial is about something we all see every day but probably never think about, those small delivery trucks.
Like commercial vehicles.
Yeah.
LCVs. The little sub 3.5-ton trucks.
The ones bringing our online shopping and our groceries.
Exactly. They are the absolute backbone of the whole e-commerce boom. But here's the thing. They are also a massive blind spot in our regulations.
A blind spot. How so?
Well, for the last decade, we've been obsessing over emissions from passenger cars and buses. But these LCVs have been operating in what's essentially a regulatory vacuum.
How big of a blind spot are we talking about here?
Huge. LCVs make up 48% of our commercial vehicles, almost half the fleet. And yet only about 2% of them are electric.
Wow. So nearly half the commercial fleet is just spewing diesel fumes, totally unregulated.
Pretty much. Until now. The Bureau of Energy Efficiency, the BEE, has finally proposed new standards that will kick in from 2027. And as you can imagine, the automakers were not exactly thrilled.
I bet. They lobbied against it.
Oh, heavily. They gave all the usual arguments. The tech's too expensive, the margins are too thin, the buyers are too price sensitive. But the government seems to be pushing ahead. However...
There's always a however.
There is. The editorial points out a potential loophole in the draft. Something they call super credits.
Super credits. That sounds like a power-up in a video game. What does it mean for emissions?
It's actually a very similar idea. It's a regulatory multiplier. So let's say you're a truck manufacturer. You sell 1,000 diesel trucks and just 10 electric ones. Your average emissions are going to look terrible.
Right.
But with super credits, the government says, hey, because we want you to make EVs, we'll let you count that one electric truck as if it were 3 or maybe 4 zero-emission vehicles.
Ah, I see. So it dilutes the bad score from all the diesel trucks. It artificially lowers your fleet's average emissions on paper.
Precisely. It makes your report card look much better than the reality on the road. Now, to be fair, China does this, the EU does this. It is a valid way to try and jumpstart production.
But the editorial is worried we're being too generous with it.
The fear is that if you apply these credits too broadly, say you give them out for hybrids or just for slightly more efficient gas engines, it becomes a loophole, not a ladder.
So manufacturers could just tweak your gas engines a little bit, sell a few hybrids, get the credits, and avoid making the big switch to electric altogether.
Exactly. They'll do the math and see it's just cheaper that way. That's the chicken and egg problem the article talks about. Electric trucks are expensive up front, so no one buys them. And because no one buys them, they stay expensive.
So the key is stringency.
Yes. The expert analysis is that if the standard is set too loose, anything above about 116.5 grams of CO2 per kilometer, it's just business as usual. The standards need to be tight enough to force the shift. Otherwise, we're just talking, not acting.
A classic case of the devil being in the details. Okay, let's flip over the opinion section. Article 3 here paints a surprisingly positive picture of a sector we usually associate with, well, inefficiency. Public sector enterprises, or PSUs.
This is a fascinating turnaround story. The article calls it the renaissance of the Indian PSU. It kicks off with the IPO of Bharat Coking Coal Limited, or BCCL.
Which was a huge deal, right?
Historic. It was oversubscribed 147 times. I mean, this is a subsidiary of Coal India. And the article's main point is, this isn't a one-off. Since 2017, the market cap for listed PSUs, we're talking HL, Cochin Shipyard, Ircon, has soared by 513%.
513%. That's staggering. It completely flips the old narrative that PSUs are just dead weight on the economy.
That is the core argument. The old view was, PSUs are loss-making burdens that drain the taxpayer. The new view is that they are wealth creators for the government and for retail shareholders. But what's even more interesting is how the government is now using this wealth.
They call it the whole-of-government approach. What does that mean in practice?
Well, instead of these companies going to the government with a begging bowl for budget allocations, they are now funding government missions themselves. The prime example given is the National Critical Mineral Mission.
That's for things like lithium and cobalt, right? The stuff we need for batteries and chips.
Exactly, the future. The mission needs about 34,300 crore rupees. But if you look at the government's tax budget, they're only putting in about 1,500 crore.
So where's the rest of the money coming from?
The PSUs. They're covering 18,000 crore of that cost. They've become strategic investors. It seems that administrative autonomy, plus the scrutiny of being on the stock market, has forced them to become agile and, strategic.
That is a major shift. Moving to the next article and opinion, we look at the workforce, specifically the youth. This piece discusses the new labor codes that came into force in November 2025.
Right. This is the biggest labor reform since independence. It consolidates 29 different confusing laws into just 4 streamlined codes. But the context here is pretty worrying.
You mean the unemployment numbers?
Exactly. India's median age is under 30. We are a very young country. But youth unemployment is sitting at 10.2%. For older adults, it's less than 1%.
That's a huge disparity. It's tough out there for a 22-year-old.
Yeah, it is. And the whole nature of work is changing. We're seeing this explosion in the gig economy. By 2029, we expect to have over 2.35 crore gig workers. The new codes try to address this. They offer things like a statutory floor wage and Social Security for them.
Which sounds great on paper, a safety net for everyone. But the article says there are some big gaps.
The biggest gap is what they call the size-based threshold. It's a classic bureaucratic loophole. A lot of these protections only apply to businesses with 10 or more workers.
But wait, what if you're working for a small startup or a local shop? You might be one of only 5 employees.
Exactly. And the data shows that 42% of young workers don't have written contracts, often because they're in these smaller setups. So a huge chunk of the young workforce is basically invisible to the law.
So the law says you get protection, but the fine print says only if you work for a big enough company.
Pretty much. And even the definition of gig work is still vague in the stats. It often gets hidden under self-employment. The key tension is that these laws are trying to balance flexibility, ease of doing business with protection. But if you can't enforce them in the informal sector, where most young people work, then the reforms won't reach those who need them most.
Oh, right. A problem of enforcement. Okay, we're going to take a hard turn now. We've talked macroeconomics, we've talked delivery trucks. Now let's go to the Large Hadron Collider.
To the frontier of physics, Article 5.
This piece is about a mystery involving something called a deuteron. Now, I'm going to need you to walk me through this like I'm 5. What is a deuteron, and why is it so surprising that we're seeing them?
A deuteron is actually very simple. It's the nucleus of what we call heavy hydrogen. Just 1 proton and 1 neutron stuck together. That's it.
Okay, 1 proton, 1 neutron. Sounds sturdy.
Actually, it's incredibly fragile. The bond holding them together it's very weak. And that is the mystery. When we smash lead ions together in the LHC, we are creating temperatures millions of times hotter than the center of the sun. It's this chaotic, violent, high-energy soup of particles.
So if I take something really fragile, like a soap bubble, and I throw it into a blast furnace,
it should pop instantly. Logic says a deuteron should not be able to exist in that environment. The energy is just too high. It would blast the proton and neutron apart immediately.
But the ALICE collaboration, the team running the experiment, they are seeing them.
They're seeing lots of them. And for a long time, physicists were just scratching their heads asking, how is this soap bubble surviving the furnace?
And what's the answer?
The answer is a process called coalescence. Basically, the deuteron isn't surviving the furnace at all. It's being born after the fire goes out.
Okay, you're going to have to break that down for me.
So the initial collision happens. Boom. A huge mess of energy and particles. Out of that crash comes a very short-lived particle called a delta resonance. Think of it like a parent particle.
Okay.
This delta resonance flies away from the main crash site. It's a tiny distance, microscopic, but it's just enough to get away from the most intense heat.
It escapes the blast zone.
Exactly. And then, once it's in a slightly calmer, cooler neighborhood, it decays. It breaks apart into a proton and a neutron. And because they are now close together and moving at similar speeds,
They can stick together?
they coalesce. They form the deuteron. They aren't survivors of the crash. They're children of the aftermath.
That's a really cool image. But I have to ask the so what question.
Yeah.
Why does it matter to us how a deuteron forms in a collider?
It matters a lot, actually, because the universe is full of these violent collisions. We have cosmic rays smashing into things in deep space all the time. So if our telescopes detect light nuclei, like these deuterons coming from far away...
We need to know where they came from.
Exactly. We need to know, was this created by a standard cosmic ray collision, which is just noise? Or is this a signal of something more exotic? Maybe something like dark matter interacting. It helps us calibrate our search for the fundamental nature of the universe.
Fascinating. From the subatomic to the geopolitical, let's move to the tech and context section. Article 6 is a grim update on the situation in Syria.
Yes, this is a heavy one. As we know, the Assad regime finally collapsed in December 2024. The hope was for peace, but the reality under the new interim leader, Ahmed al-Shara, has been, well, renewed conflict.
And the main target seems to be the Kurds in the northeast of the country.
That's right. The Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, these were the main allies of the U.S. in the fight against ISIS. For over a decade, the Kurds managed to build an autonomous region called Rojava. But now Shara, who, and we should remember this, was formerly part of an al-Qaeda affiliate, is trying to centralize power, and that means attacking them.
And the Kurds are losing ground.
Rapidly. The article says they're retreating from strategic areas like Raqqa and Deir al-Zour. The city of Kobane is under siege. And the real tragedy for them is this international realignment. They've been left out in the cold.
By the United States.
By the U.S. and Turkey. It's a very cynical geopolitical shift. Turkey has always opposed Kurdish autonomy because of the PKK connection. But now the U.S. has pivoted. They met with Shara in Washington in November 2025. The new consensus between Washington and Ankara is to support a centralized Syria.
And why?
To push out Iranian and Russian influence. So to get rid of Iran and Russia, they are sacrificing their former allies, the Kurds.
That's brutal.
It is. Shara is offering them some cultural rights like language and holidays, but he's demanding total military and political surrender. It's a betrayal of the autonomy they built while fighting ISIS for the rest of the world. A stark reminder that there are no permanent friends, only permanent interests.
Absolutely. Staying in text and context, Article 6 looks at a very different kind of alliance, the India-EU Strategic Agenda for 2030.
This is a very forward-looking piece. The idea is to move the India-EU relationship beyond just simple trade and into an offensive tech partnership, specifically in AI and semiconductors.
Okay, let's start with the chips.
Yeah.
The article uses the term heterogeneous integration. Can you unpack that?
Sure. India can't really build the most advanced, 3-nanometer chips yet. That technology takes decades and hundreds of billions of dollars to master. So instead of trying to play catch-up there, the partnership focuses on advanced packaging.
You mean like stacking chips together like Lego blocks?
That's a perfect way to think about it. You take different specialized chips, memory, logic, power controllers, and you stack them together into a single powerful unit. This is absolutely crucial for AI hardware like GPUs, and the agenda proposes creating blue valleys in India to do this.
Blue valleys?
Yeah, these would be special regulatory zones that act almost like extensions of the EU single market. It just removes all the red tape for exporting these high-tech components directly to Europe. It's a way to plug India right into that European supply chain.
There's also a really interesting angle here on AI safety and civil liberties.
This is the most intriguing part, I think. The EU has very, very strict regulations on artificial intelligence, things about privacy, bias, human rights. The agreement aims to create a common market for AI.
So if Indian companies want to sell their AI models in Europe,
they have to pass those strict EU safety tests. And the hope, the article calls it a civil liberties backdoor, is that this could improve digital rights for Indian users by default. If your AI model has to be built to not be biased to pass a European audit, then the domestic version might be cleaner too.
but there's a risk.
Of course. The risk is a two-tier system. You could end up with clean, safe AI for export to Europe and a more invasive, unregulated version for use right here at home. It's a space we absolutely have to watch.
Indeed. All right, let's move to our final section, business. Article 8 brings us back to global currency markets, and specifically the eroding U.S. dollar.
The greenback is definitely under fire. It's early 2026, and the dollar is down 9% over the last year. And once again, the article points the finger at the Trump factor.
It's a recurring theme today. The policies are just so erratic.
Erratic is an understatement. I mean, we're talking about threats to buy Greenland, indicting the Fed chair, seizing the Venezuelan president, and declaring Liberation Day tariffs. Markets hate uncertainty, and this is what the article calls antagonistic and geopolitical chaos.
So where's all that money going?
It's a flight to safety. To gold, to the Swiss franc, to the euro. Investors are diversifying out of U.S. assets. The S&P 500 is up only 15%, while Seoul's stock market is up 95%, and Tokyo's is up 40%.
And the central banks are moving in opposite directions too, right?
Yes, that's a huge part of it. The U.S. Fed is expected to cut interest rates, which weakens the dollar. Meanwhile, other nations might hold their rates or even hike them. Plus, there's all this speculation that Trump might appoint a new Fed chair, Rick Rieder, who is known to favor even lower rates. all signs point to a continued bearish outlook for the dollar.
Which brings us to our final story, Article 9. And we've gone from macroeconomics to physics, and now we end with a business struggle that I think hits a bit closer to home for many of us. Starbucks.
This is a supply chain horror story. It focuses on the CEO, Brian Niccol, trying to turn the ship around. The stock is up a little, but sales are flat. And the reason isn't that people don't want coffee, it's that Starbucks literally cannot get milk in cups to its stores.
The numbers in this piece are just shocking. In early 2024, their on-time in-full delivery rate, which is a holy grail of logistics, was less than 33%.
Less than a third. So you're saying if a store manager ordered 100 items, they were getting the wrong thing, or it was late 2/3 of the time?
Exactly. Imagine trying to run a busy cafe when you have no idea if your milk delivery is coming today, tomorrow, or maybe never. And the culprit? Well, if you work in IT, you might want to cover your ears.
Oh no, what are they running on?
The backbone of their entire supply chain system is based on IBM AS400 architecture.
AS400? Wait, I'm doing the math in my head. That's from 1997.
1997. I was listening to the Spice Girls on a Walkman in 1997. Are you telling me a global coffee giant in 2026 is running on software from the era of dial-up internet?
That's what the article says, and it describes upgrading it as being like changing the engine of an airplane while it's flying. It is deep, deep legacy tech debt. And it gets worse. They tried to fix it with AI.
Of course they did. AI fixes everything, right?
Well, not when the foundation is rotten. They rolled out this new automated counting app. The idea was great. Use cameras and LiDAR in the stores to count the stock on the shelves automatically.
Sounds futuristic.
It was a complete disaster. The AI couldn't tell the difference between different types of milk bottles. It would miss items entirely. So you had bad, unreliable data being fed into a 30-year-old computer system.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. And it led to incredible waste. They tried another program called Never Out, which forced shipments to stores to prevent shortages. But they forgot one crucial detail about their stores.
They don't have storage space.
Zero space. The stores were designed to make coffee, not to be mini warehouses. There's an anecdote in here about a barista who had to throw away 3 giant garbage bags of food in a single night because the system sent them way too much and they physically couldn't fit it in the fridge.
That is just heartbreaking, all that waste.
And it is. And it's a powerful lesson for any business leader listening. You can't just slap a shiny layer of AI on top of a broken, outdated process and expect magic. You have to fix the plumbing first.
A cautionary tale indeed. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive. From the strange dance of the rupee and the dollar, to the birth of particles deep underground, and the very real problem of getting a latte on time.
It really does highlight how interconnected everything is. Politics affects currency, regulations affect delivery trucks, and old tech can cripple a global giant.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.